if you look back on history, one of the things that makes us believe that working in an integral endeavor is not merely an idea that some of us thought up and that we think, oh, we've got the great idea that's going to change the world. The idea comes from developmental studies, actual empirical studies about the levels, waves, stages of growth and development that human beings go through. And there are these stages of yellow and turquoise using spiral dynamics, or autonomous and integrated using Jane Loevinger scales and so on. These represent real levels or stages of human awareness. Those are there. It's not my idea, it's not your idea, we didn't dream this up. Since those are there, we can actually measure the number of people that are at it. At turquoise, 0.5% of the population. That's not a whole lot of people. So under those circumstances, obviously this is a new endeavor. But you can look back in history, there was a time when egoic rational or orange or modernist values were at the same place. They were about 1% of the population. That movement eventually led to the Western Enlightenment, the rise of modern representative democracies, extraordinary benefits in terms of equality and freedom for people across the board. But the first men and women that were doing that had no bloody idea what they were doing, except that they were living this new consciousness that they were trying to articulate. It's an actual, concrete reality that was speaking through them and moving through them. It wasn't an idea they made up. It's not like, oh, I dreamt up deconstruction, if I can talk everybody else into agreeing with it. This is actually a territory in reality that's unfolding. And these people were inhabiting that. And as that happened, they're trying to articulate it all the way across the board. What would education look like if this is true? And for the early men and women that were working with modernist values and working with the Enlightenment values in the West, that included the ideas eventually of the equality of all men and women, certainly equal opportunity. It included the notion of education across the board. It was obviously gave rise to the representative democracies that replaced monarchy and aristocracy. In a 100-year period, slavery was banned from every rational industrial democracy across the face of the planet. That had never happened before, ever in history. So all of these things were getting institutionalized in a way that when they were first starting, they were just vague glimmers in the minds of men and women who were inhabiting that world-centric awareness. So if that is real, and I believe it is, then we're not making it up when we say, of course, succeeding epochs would have the same thing happening at whatever the growing edge is for them. And for us, the growing edge today is by whatever name, vision logic, or integral, or turquoise. That means that to the extent that that awareness is speaking through us, we are, in a sense, agents of that change. We are sitting here struggling to find ways to give voice to an integral awareness that includes more, that touches more, that embraces more, that reaches out with more care and compassion and love than any other structure has. That's what's moving us. That's what's drawn us here. Not some idea that some of us dreamt up, but something that's speaking through us because it's real and it's already there, and we're the agents of that. So all we can do is have as much integrity and authenticity and openness as we can, so that voice can speak through us with a clarity that will resonate with other people, with their hearts and their minds and their souls, and bring them into accord with that awareness, because it's there. Now, whether we live up to it or not, it's there and it's happening. But we're right on that leading edge where less than 0.5% of the population is doing that. If you go back again to the example we're using with Western Enlightenment, when less than half of 1% of the population was even thinking those ideas, people were actually writing treatises about what if we freed slaves? What if all men and women are created equal? That was a radically unheard of idea. Milton was writing, John Stuart Mill was writing a treatise on why men and women should have equal rights. That was really a weird idea. There was treatises being written about how maybe a king and a monarchy is not the only way to have a government. And if you opened your mouth too widely on that one, there's a very, very interesting weekends awaited you. Not to mention what happened if you dared to talk about the idea that the Pope and the dogma was deeply confused. There's a little thing called the Spanish Inquisition that had ways to chat with you about that one. If these different levels and waves are real, based on the research that we have, anybody plugging into that half of 1%, not just us, but that half of 1% is 5 million people, even in this country alone. Every one of those people is a closeted integralist. Every one of them are thinking these kinds of ideas and thinking about these things and how to make it happen. And every one of them are confused because they don't have anybody to talk to about it. And they think they're the only ones thinking this. And they're the only ones that see how everything is fitting together in a much bigger picture of love and care and concern and compassion. And nobody else understands what the hell they're talking about. And so then they stumble onto some of the stuff that we're doing and they go, I knew that. And then they feel like they're coming home. But how we start to institutionalize that is exactly, the challenge, the fun, and the nightmare.